Good morning. My name is Anthony Feist, and I'm a lead pre-sales engineer at Citrix, focusing on the workspace and analytics. And yeah, thank you for giving me an opportunity to present and showcase the value of Citrix technologies. So, remote work, BYOD, allowing flexibility in times of uncertainty are topics that organizations largely paid lip service to prior to the pandemic. Suddenly, many organizations were thrust into making these a reality without properly planning or having the appropriate systems in place. There's been many organizations that, as a result, since the pandemic, that have been trying to return back to the old ways. But much to John's point, I think many organizations have seen the benefits of hybrid work and are now transitioning from this crisis mode, this disruption, as John talked about, to planning a new way of work for the organization. And enabling hybrid work is just really one aspect. Chip shortages have forced many organizations to embrace public cloud, as an example, as the supply of data center infrastructure and even laptops has been unpredictable. They've also been forced to consider non-traditional endpoints, from a supply and cost perspective. And they've also realized that user experience is a key metric to retain top talent and ensure that staff are productive when working remotely. Remote work is here to stay, and that's a good thing. The environmental benefits is just one aspect, and John touched on that. But many skilled employees will consider the hybrid work policy of an organization when choosing one organization over another. And while hybrid work has many benefits, there are also risks. Systems need to be exposed to the internet. And for many organizations, they're not in the business of IT. Their strategy is to consume services that take the legwork and risk out of delivering services to their users. Citrix has a comprehensive set of technologies that can be delivered as both SaaS services hosted in Citrix Cloud and more traditional on-premise deployments. The Citrix Workspace is an ecosystem of services that work together to provide users what they need, and IT with the management platform to deliver them in the most efficient and secure way. Today, I'll focus on three areas of the workspace: virtualization, analytics, and collaborative work management. So why choose Citrix? Simply put, this is what we do. Our focus has always been on remote work, and all of our energy has gone into building technologies to support these three pillars of experience, security, and flexibility. We've built networking technologies to ensure that we can optimize the delivery of our remote work solutions from any locations. We built intelligent analytics to provide visibility of user experience and the security posture of the users. We built our cloud services on Azure, but we also provide the flexibility to utilize any cloud provider, hosted provider, or even your on-premise workloads and data centers. We are looking to the future with our collaborative work management solution, focusing on changing how people work. So focusing on delivering applications and desktops, we're able to provide a variety of workload types, from web and SaaS apps to server-based apps and desktops, VDI, Linux-based apps and desktops, and even remote PC. Remote PC is a very interesting example, which is basically virtualizing a physical desktop. Before the pandemic, it was pretty much a fringe technology. And many of our customers, but when many of our customers needed to enable a large proportion of their workforce to work from home, they found that they had a large desktop estate stuck in the office, just idling. With remote PC, they were able to virtualize those desktops and allow the employees to connect to their desktop from any device. And that meant that the employees could even use their home PC or tablets, and the organization didn't need to purchase large infrastructure to cater for all these users, as they already had their desktops available in the office. And that brings us to endpoint devices. Citrix has been delivering virtualization technologies for about 30 years and has a broad support across different endpoint devices. Now, this doesn't just mean delivering screen updates and keyboard and mouse. It really includes a lot more than just that. And, if you think about your typical endpoint device and the peripherals that you have connected right now, when you virtualize a desktop, you need to virtualize all of those add-on devices. And they need to work in the same way as if you were sitting in front of your desktop. Now, Citrix has developed mature technology stack that can enable any use case. And that's really what differentiates us from the rest of the players in the market. And when we discuss flexibility, one of the most important topics that comes to mind for anyone considering a journey to cloud is, which cloud do I choose? We've built our Citrix cloud on top of Azure, but when it comes to customers, they have other cloud providers that they might use. They may have a combination of cloud providers. So, when you look at where you want to host those workloads, Citrix provides the flexibility of choosing, either one cloud provider or even hosting it within your own data center, or potentially a combination of cloud providers and on-premise workloads, or even hosted providers. From a Citrix perspective, we want to give you the freedom to be agile, to be able to move your workloads where they make sense and not be locked into any specific platform. Now, I thought I would just change tact here and talk about some of the common use cases for Citrix virtualization and why it makes sense. John talked a lot about disruption and how businesses respond to it, and really, not just dealing with the problem at hand, but then reimagining what the future will look like, and doing things a better way into the future. We had quite a few discussions with customers when the pandemic first hit, and their response to enabling remote users working from home varied. There were some organizations that basically scaled up their VPNs and tried to accommodate, when it was designed for 10% of the workforce, all of a sudden they need to now scale it up to 70% of the workforce. And obviously there were challenges there, scalability, quickly moving their capacity up and down, monitoring user experience, because before it hadn't really been a focus. It was, well, we got this VPN technology and we've got a couple of users on it, and all of a sudden everyone's on the VPN and it becomes this critical service within the organization. Other organizations told us that they had a huge desktop estate. They didn't really have a lot of laptops. So what they did is they basically sent everyone home with a physical desktop and a keyboard and mouse under their arm and their laptop under the other arm. And off they went home, and then they kind of had to figure out how to give them connectivity. So they bought them maybe 3G cards and gave them some data. And then, ESCOM came into the mix and we started to have power disruptions. So now they had to buy them, UPSs and, generators and, from what was a very simple solution, just send them home with their desktops, it became a very complicated and expensive and a difficult to manage situation. A very easy decision, well, we'll just let them carry on doing things the way they were doing it, but at home became a very disruptive, costly, and a poor experience for the end users. So, obviously at the time, they had to make a decision. This crisis is upon us. We don't have technologies in place to deal with it. So, let's, use what we've got, and then we'll kind of figure things out as we go. And, to John's point, they kind of dealt with the crisis. They, optimized and made things work as well as they could in that scenario. But that scenario was never an ideal scenario to start with, and never a sustainable one. So now, many organizations are at the point of reimagining how to deliver work to end users working remotely. And we've had many conversations with customers, and with Citrix, we've been talking about remote work, for the last 20 years. And to be honest, most of our customers use Citrix within the data center with a very small proportion of users working from home. But the good thing with our technologies is they're designed to work remotely in a very efficient way with a lot of flexibility. So for many of our customers, as Kurt mentioned earlier, they were able to seamlessly transition over to this work from home environment with very little disruption and in a very efficient way. So, when we look at some of these typical use cases, these are the low-hanging fruit. This is where, it makes a lot of sense to look at things like virtualization. But in reality, and with the Citrix Workspace and the greater workspace, it can meet any needs of an organization and has been designed in that way to accommodate any scenarios that can be thrown at it. And that flexibility, that responsiveness is really core to Citrix's value and our mindset. So looking at the first use case that I thought I wanted to discuss with you, and very much in line with what we just spoke about, we also had many conversations with customers where they actually had to go out and buy like i7 laptops with 32 gigs of RAM for their employees because there were no other laptops available when the crisis first hit. There was a panic buying spree where, organizations were snapping up everything that was available on the market. We had disruptions because, you're even seeing it today I saw Apple's stocks dropped, 20% or something like that because there's concerns around chip shortages for the new iPhones. The impact of the crisis will be felt for many, many years. I mean, if you look at the shipping crisis, the global shipping crisis, all of these things are a backlog of the pandemic. And organizations are, I think, coming to terms with the fact that things aren't going to return to normal very quickly. To John's point, we need to be resilient, but in a way that we can adapt to challenges. The example of the airplane, on the fly, we need to be able to, we need like a Swiss Army knife of technologies to deal with different challenges that are thrown at us. And with Citrix Workspace, we offer that. So if you look at, many businesses, they couldn't buy infrastructure for the data centers. So, what do? We need to enable new services for staff, but we just don't have capacity. So, this is where the power of the cloud really came to the fore. We know that, cloud's probably not going to be less expensive than building things ourselves in the data center. That's just the reality. But what cloud does give us is supreme hyperscalability, flexibility, and agility. And many organizations saw that benefit and started identifying services that made sense with that context in mind. And, with Citrix, as I mentioned, we have flexibility as one of our core principles, and we enable hybrid multi-cloud. So, today you may have most of your workloads on-prem. And, with our Citrix Cloud technologies, we can accommodate all of those workloads and deliver them to your users in a single, easy-to-use user interface. But as some of those workloads that you have on-prem today move to the cloud, with Citrix, you can easily start publishing those workloads to those users from the cloud provider, and there'll be no user disruption. They will still see the same icon, they'll still click on it the same way, and they won't even be aware that workload has moved from the on-prem data center to that cloud environment. So what that means for your end users is they've got a lot of disruption to deal with. The easier you can make it for them, the better. So, not giving them a new login and a new portal and a new way of doing things really talks to that user experience. And for IT, you now have a way of moving workloads to the cloud without massive disruption and with an easy fallback. So, you can move it to the cloud and be agile enough to move it back to the data center if it doesn't work, or to another cloud provider if that makes more sense. Cloud providers are kind of becoming a bit of a commodity. When you start using infrastructure as a service solutions, it all comes down to the cost of the service, and what are you paying per VM per hour, and from year to year you might need to change direction, and you need a solution that gives you that flexibility and gives you the ability to do that. And not just that, but having a single management stack across all of those different infrastructure geographies as well as providers gives you end-to-end visibility across your infrastructure. Not only our workspace technologies, but our networking technologies as well have been built to be, to support all the different cloud providers, so that we can ensure that we're not just delivering a desktop from Azure as an example, but we can ensure that the path from the user to that desktop is the optimal path. And we have visibility in terms of that path to understand what that user experience is and to remediate challenges along the way. So, I've mentioned some of the benefits that we bring to this kind of new world and to this kind of cloud DR/hybrid cloud flexibility. One of my customers, I was having a conversation with them the other day, and there's one metric that we provide that they said no other workspace solution can provide, and that's the last mile connectivity visibility. And he said without that, and he runs an estate of 5,000 users, delivering virtualization. He said without that, he couldn't deliver a service to his business. And the reason for that is, users are, they're users. They're not IT professionals. They get a tool, they use it, and if there's a problem with that tool, it's the fault of the tool. They don't know if there's a challenge on their home network. They don't know if their endpoint device is slow. When they log a call, it's Citrix is slow. And he said with that last mile visibility, being able to see the latency from the end user's home device to their entry point into the environment, he's able to tell a user, you've got a problem with your internet, or your endpoint device is misbehaving. And just that one thing makes all the difference to the service that he delivers. And that's the value of Citrix. We've been doing this for a long time. We understand the data points you need to be able to manage your environments in the most efficient way, and the tools you need from an administrative perspective to make sure that you can deliver a quality service to the business and quickly resolve issues as they come up. The next topic that I wanted to discuss was desktop as a service. There's been many desktop as a service solutions that have come into the market over the last little while, and desktop as a service is a very attractive idea for business. Let's not worry about any of the underlying infrastructure. We pay a monthly bill and we get a desktop. It's great, and that's all we need. And the simplicity of that desktop as a service model is what people are looking for. But in reality, simplicity is great in certain circumstances, but when you start looking at it, and scaling it out, that simplicity can become a hindrance. We've had a desktop as a service solution for, I think it's about 5 years now, and it's matured over time to really provide a lot of flexibility to the organization. So you can have that very simple desktop with just Office on it and off you go. Or you can even have integration into your own Azure subscription to tunnel, line of business applications back to where they need to be, and build your own application stack into that image and manage it in a very efficient way. And with our desktop as a service solution, we provide all of the usual benefits of a desktop as a service solution, flexibility, time to value, the ability to rapidly expand, adding more resources. And, we do that because we've partnered with our partners industry like Microsoft to build on top of Azure so that we can take advantage of that kind of hyperscaler network to really be able to provision resources very quickly and easily. And the other topic that I think has really been top of mind for a lot of businesses, especially in South Africa, is preventing business disruptions. We feels like a couple of weeks ago, but a couple of months ago we had some. There were very worrying times for businesses with the kind of riots and all the challenges that we had, in South Africa. As a country, I mean, we are very resilient. Aside from all the challenges we had around COVID and the economy, we got thrown into this new challenge of will our branches and our head office still be standing tomorrow? You don't know. And it's amazing the resilience of South Africans to almost shrug it off and just deal with the challenge at hand. And I think we did that very admirably. But I think it also, at the same time, a lot of businesses started asking themselves the question, yes, we dodged a bullet here, but what if, what if our data center got burnt down? What if, our staff were not able to return to the plants, the manufacturing plants? How would we respond to these disruptions? And often BCP plans, DR plans were, important exercises that organizations did, but kind of largely paper-based. There was maybe a DR site, but one test a year, and it was kind of glossed over a bit. Important things, DR failures, tick those boxes. But when you start looking at it in reality, I think a lot of organizations realize that they just aren't prepared for the types of disasters that could actually happen. So really preventing these business disruptions, having technologies in place and plans in place to really be able to adapt to any kind of circumstances is, I think, really top of mind for many businesses today. And, from a Citrix perspective, again, we provide a lot of flexibility, a lot of choice, a lot of resilience with our technologies. And, how we can help in these types of situations is, really providing a lot of resiliency to remote locations. With our hybrid multi-cloud approach, there's no single point of failure. You could build your technology stack across multiple cloud and on-premise locations, and very seamlessly fail between them. With our proactive analytics, you can get insights into challenges in the environment before users start logging calls. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this a bit later because it's a very important topic. But, having that visibility in terms of your services and getting, instant notifications when things start going wrong is really, puts IT in a position where they can be a partner to business rather than just a service provider to business. We also know that aside from all the other challenges, organizations have had to deal with, presenting a lot of their services out onto the internet in a very quick way, raise some challenges from a security perspective. Maybe all the checks and balances that would typically be in place weren't, because, we had to respond very quickly. And as a result, we've seen over the last couple of years a massive rise in the number of malware, ransomware attacks on organizations. I mean, the number of, I don't know if you think about, of the number of public disclosures of ransomware and hacking and where organizations have been brought to their knees for days and weeks while dealing with the fallout of those events. That becomes also, really top of mind and something that not only disrupts businesses, but can also cause massive reputational damage in terms of, loss of customer information, especially in light of POPI and some of the other regulatory requirements that are in place at the moment. And then, aside from just delivering something to users, providing a workspace to a user in a high performance experience is critical. You know, for people to be productive when they work from home, you know, it's disruptive enough to, you know, have to deal with things like sick children and um, you know, load shedding and all the other challenges that we've had while working remotely. You know, having a poor performing work experience, you really don't need that on top. And you know, that can lead to not only loss of productivity, but loss of enthusiasm and loss of you know, motivation of staff. So, you know, something that John touched on that's kind of very close to my heart as well is you know, the environment and kind of IT-led sustainability. You know, as business and you know, globally, you know, we probably haven't done things right, really, if you look at it. And there's been a lot of waste and a lot of unnecessary consumption. So, you know, finding technologies where we can really help reduce that footprint by, you know, reusing endpoint devices, you know, not having to courier laptops to people at home or send support staff out to people's houses or ship devices halfway across the world to enable people to work. You know, not only saves the organization money, but also, you know, contributes towards a greener economy and just doing things differently, which I think is really something that we as people and businesses need to focus on into the future. And, you know, how Citrix helps in that regard is really, you know, being able to, you know, extend device lifespans. You know, with Citrix technology, the processing, the brain is centralized, you know, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's in the data center. The endpoint device becomes less and less relevant. So if you look at old laptops, you know, you can, you know, extend the life of those devices because the processing is happening centrally. You know, those devices don't need to be able to handle, you know, the latest Teams update or Windows update. You know, you can remove all the unnecessary clutter off those devices and just use them as a, you know, almost a dumb terminal, you know, or even, you know, switching to kind of low energy devices. You know, Chromebooks are, you know, a really good example of that, where it's, you know, there's a couple of benefits on those devices. You know, not only are they, you know, really inexpensive, but their risk profile is low because it's essentially just a browser running on the device. They're therefore much easier to manage, and there's some great management tools for Chromebooks as an example. They also use less power. They're portable devices, they're laptops, so you know they tick all those boxes, and they're secure because there's no data on those devices. All the data sits in the data center. You can't extrapolate data onto those devices because it's just really one big browser. And you know, being able to offer that flexibility, you know, being able to allow staff to use a MacBook if they want, or their home desktop, you know, being able to flex between their private life and their work life and have the two separated on that endpoint device, you know, really helps, you know, improve, you know, not having to have two separate devices, one for work, one for personal, really starts reducing that footprint. So, you know, the last kind of use case that I wanted to talk about was, you know, I thought it would be good to just kind of talk about some of the low-hanging fruit, the quick wins, the really good examples, and where to think about virtualization and where it makes the most sense. And I thought I'd break it down into two separate sections: worker types and workload types. So from a worker type perspective, you know, virtualization makes a lot of sense when you're looking at task-based workers. You know, we see a lot of customers that have, you know, call centers, retail branches where there's high staff turnover. The work, you know, what the users need to do their job is highly repeatable. It's templatized, and the support burden in those environments is high because of the high staff turnover, generally the low skill of the workers. means that it's very disruptive, and that not only creates a burden from an IT perspective, but also from a business perspective, because it leads to disruption. With Citrix technology, you can do things like spin up hundreds of desktops from a single image, and they're all mirror images of each other. And when there's a change to an application, make it in the golden image and push it out. So for call centers, you can update very consistently huge amounts of endpoint devices. And from a consistency perspective, all of those users get exactly the same thing. There's no change. They move from one desk to another. There's no difference. You look at retail branches as another example, especially in this kind of time of COVID, being able to deliver a consistent experience to a branch is paramount. And being able to support it centrally means that you don't need to have an IT staff member driving to a branch. You especially consider the lockdown, people not having freedom of movement, some of the logistical challenges around that, that really adds a lot of value to organizations. In terms of the different kind of workers, we see this really works well for things like contractors, developers, third parties, because instead of having to ship someone a laptop that's in another country, another location, you can just deliver a workspace to their current endpoint device. And things like BYD and CYD I've already discussed. And then in terms of workload types, security, if security is paramount, if high performance is required, 3D workloads, highly repeatable, even legacy and complicated applications, Citrix can provide a solution to all of those different workload types. So, I've touched on all of this already, and I'm running out of time. So I'll wrap up with 3 key takeaways. From a Citrix perspective, what differentiates us is our focus on experience, security, and flexibility. With the remote workforce, and much to John's point, it's key to have flexibility is almost paramount when delivering a remote workspace, because you never know what the future is going to hold. You never know what changes are going to happen. And you need to be able to respond in the best possible way and in the quickest possible way to the challenges that are presented. Thank you for your time. I'll see you later on for the analytics and Write discussion.